Singapore didn't become wealthy by accident. It was engineered into it. A small island at a strategic maritime crossroads with no natural resources, no oil, limited land, and historically even a dependence on imported fresh water. By most conventional expectations, it should have remained a modest trading port at best. Instead, it evolved into one of the richest, safest, and most efficiently governed city-states in the world. What makes Singapore unusual is not just the outcome, but the structure behind it. This is not a country that simply grew. It is a system that was built, adjusted, and continuously optimized like an engineered machine. Just a few decades ago, in the mid-20th century, Singapore was a struggling port city facing overcrowding, unemployment, and uncertain political stability. Today, it is a global financial hub, a logistics supernode, and a key center for technology, banking, and trade in Asia. The transformation was not gradual in the passive sense. It was actively constructed through long-term planning and institutional design. Everything in Singapore reflects this logic of design. The city does not expand randomly. It develops in planned layers where land use, transportation, housing, and commercial zones are coordinated as parts of a single long-term model. Even vertical development is tightly managed. Skyscrapers are not simply added to the skyline. They are integrated into a controlled spatial strategy that anticipates future population growth and economic demand. Despite extreme urban density, Singapore is also famously green. But this is not natural preservation. It is engineered integration. Parks, trees, and green corridors are not decorative afterthoughts. They are mandatory components of urban planning. The result is a paradoxical environment, one of the most densely built cities in the world that still feels structured, breathable, and deliberately balanced. The same logic applies to governance. The state operates less like a traditional bureaucracy and more like a long-horizon management system. Policies are designed decades ahead, not just years. Problems are not simply reacted to. They are modeled, anticipated, and often neutralized before they emerge at scale. Geography gave Singapore an opportunity, but not an outcome. Positioned on one of the busiest maritime trade routes in the world, between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea, it naturally sits at a global choke point of commerce. Yet, so do other regions. The difference is how Singapore transformed location into infrastructure advantage. Its port system is one of the most efficient on the planet. It functions as a highly automated logistics engine where cargo flow, docking, customs processing, and distribution are optimized to minimize delays. In global shipping, time is capital, and Singapore built a system designed to reduce wasted seconds into measurable economic value. But infrastructure alone does not explain the stability of the system. A defining feature of Singapore is institutional predictability. The country has constructed a governance environment where rules are clear, consistently enforced, and largely insulated from arbitrary change. Corruption is not merely discouraged, it is structurally disincentivized through high public sector salaries, strict oversight, and low tolerance for violations. This produces something rare in global economics: trust as infrastructure. Businesses, banks, and multinational corporations operate in Singapore not just because of geography or tax advantages, but because the rules of the system are stable over time. In an uncertain global environment, predictability itself becomes a competitive asset.
Economically, Singapore does not rely on spontaneous development. It is strategically guided. The state identifies key sectors: finance, logistics, biotechnology, digital industries, advanced manufacturing, and actively shapes conditions for their growth while still preserving market mechanisms. It is not a fully centralized economy, but it is not passive either. It operates through targeted direction rather than broad control. Even physical space is treated as a managed resource. Land scarcity is not accepted as a limitation, it is actively engineered around. Large areas of Singapore are built on reclaimed land, extending the coastline outward over time. The geography itself is partially constructed. Housing follows the same philosophy. The majority of the population lives in state-developed residential estates, but these are not temporary or minimal structures. They are fully integrated urban ecosystems with transport access, schools, healthcare, and commercial infrastructure built into the design. The goal is not just shelter, but systemic urban cohesion. Transportation is similarly optimized. Public transit is designed to reduce friction at every level, while car ownership is deliberately made expensive through regulation and taxation. The objective is not restriction for its own sake, but density management, ensuring that a limited land area does not collapse under private vehicle demand. Education and human capital development form another core layer. The system is structured around adaptability, producing a workforce capable of shifting with economic changes rather than remaining fixed in one specialization. At the same time, Singapore actively imports global talent, creating a dense concentration of expertise in a small geographic space. Over time, this produces a reinforcing cycle. Stable institutions attract capital, capital attracts business, business creates opportunity, and opportunity further strengthens institutions. The system becomes self-sustaining not through scale, but through feedback loops. Seen as a whole, Singapore is not simply a wealthy nation. It is a demonstration of how constraints can be converted into structure, how scarcity, when managed with long-term planning and institutional discipline, can produce not limitation but efficiency. It is not a story about size, and it is not a story about resources. It is a story about design.